Alhamdulillah. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, may peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is a moment in life when the noise becomes too loud and the heart becomes too tired to carry one more storm. In that moment, Allah gently draws you into a sacred space, a quietness that feels like mercy, a silence that doesn't feel empty but healing, a silence where the soul finally breathes again. Allah says in Surah Qaf, we are closer to Him than His jugular vein. Sometimes that closeness is not felt in words, but in the stillness between them, in the pauses, in the moments when you stop fighting the world and simply allow Allah to hold what you cannot. There is a wisdom in silence that speaks louder than any voice. It is the silence after heartbreak, when your tears dry but your heart still trembles. It is the silence of disappointment, when you don't know what to pray for anymore. It is the silence of fear, when your heart beats faster than your thoughts. And it is the silence of waiting, the long aching quietness where dua becomes a whisper and surrender becomes a necessity. Yet in that stillness, something miraculous happens. Your pain stops screaming and your soul starts listening. Listening to the reassurance buried beneath the fear. Listening to the strength hidden under the sadness. Listening to the calm that was always meant for you. Allah reminds us, verily, with hardship comes ease. But ease is not always loud. Sometimes ease is a quiet shift inside you. The moment you stop breaking yourself, trying to fix what was never in your control. That is the power of silence. It teaches you that peace is not found in forcing outcomes, but in resting your heart with the one who already wrote your story. The Prophet taught that silence is wisdom. And perhaps that wisdom is knowing when to speak, but more importantly, when to let go, when to pull back, when to protect your energy, your heart, your iman. There are battles where silence is your shield. There are moments when your silence becomes a du'a, a form of worship, a surrender to Allah that words could never express. Human beings carry storms inside them. Heartbreak that makes the chest heavy. Loneliness that makes the nights long. Fear that whispers worst-case scenarios. And disappointment that dims the soul. But faith transforms these storms. Silence allows that transformation. It gives you space to feel without drowning, to hurt without collapsing, to wait without losing hope. So here is a principle to take into your everyday life. Before you respond, pause. Before you react, breathe. Before you speak, turn inward and ask your heart if Allah would be pleased with what you're about to release into the world. Silence is not just the absence of words. It is the presence of awareness. A reminder that not everything needs your reaction. Not every pain needs to be voiced, and not every moment needs to be filled. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to say nothing and let Allah speak for you. Let Allah defend you. Let Allah heal you. Let Allah write what your tongue is too tired to explain. There is a silence that breaks you and a silence that builds you. May Allah give you the silence that heals, the silence that brings you back to Him, one breath, one tear, and one surrender at a time. Silence is a sanctuary where the heart finally hears what the noise of the world hides. It is the place you return to when your soul grows tired of running, pretending, and carrying too much. In silence, something sacred happens. The layers of distraction that surround the heart begin to fall away, one by one. The world teaches you to speak, to defend, to argue, to explain yourself constantly. But silence teaches you to simply be. It teaches you to listen to the quiet voice inside that has been drowned beneath expectations, noise, and emotional weight. In silence, your heart becomes honest. It tells you truths you avoided facing. It guides you toward the wounds that still need healing. It reveals the things that truly matter and exposes the illusions you've been holding on to. Silence has a way of slowing you down just enough for you to notice what your soul has been whispering all along. It becomes a mirror, reflecting back your emotional patterns, your fears, your hopes, your strengths, and your weaknesses. And because there is no noise to hide behind, you are finally able to hear the parts of yourself that were begging for attention. This sanctuary of quietness is not empty. It is full. Full of clarity, full of reflection, full of a presence that feels like mercy. Silence allows you to sense Allah in ways that words cannot capture. It reminds you that the heart has its own language, a language that only Allah understands. When the world becomes overwhelming, silence comforts you by reminding you that you do not need to respond to everything. You do not need to fight every battle, and you do not need to prove your worth. In silence, you rediscover the peace that was always waiting underneath the noise. In silence, the soul confronts its wounds without running away. There is a certain truth that becomes undeniable when the world quiets down and you are left alone with your own heart. The distractions you used to reach for no longer shield you. The noise that once covered your pain begins to fade, and suddenly the feelings you buried rise gently to the surface. Silence does not expose you to harm, it exposes you to healing. It is the space where you meet the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, the disappointments you never processed, the heartbreak you tried to forget, the fears that live silently underneath your strength. When you stop running, something profound happens. You begin to understand your own emotions in a deeper way. You start recognizing why certain moments hurt you so much, why certain memories still echo in your chest, why certain people affected you so deeply. Silence gives you the courage to sit with your pain without drowning in it. It allows you to explore your wounds with gentleness instead of judgment. This confrontation isn't harsh. It's soft, like a whisper telling you it's finally safe to feel. In that stillness, the soul becomes honest with itself. You realize that healing cannot happen through avoidance or denial. Healing requires presence. Silence becomes that presence, a compassionate companion that encourages you to look inward and acknowledge what has been left untouched. And as you face these wounds, you begin to discover strength where you once saw weakness, resilience where you once felt broken, and understanding where you once felt confusion. Silence becomes the womb of transformation. It teaches you that your wounds are not signs of failure. They are invitations to grow, to rise, and to return to Allah with a softer heart and a clearer soul. Silence softens the heart and opens the door to true reflection. When the world grows loud with demands, expectations, and emotions that pull you in every direction, the heart begins to harden as a form of protection. It becomes guarded, tense, and overwhelmed. But when silence enters, it acts like a gentle rain on dry earth. It softens what was stiff. It loosens what was constricted. It allows the heart to breathe again. In that softened state, the heart becomes more receptive, more able to feel, understand, and connect with what truly matters. When the noise falls away, you can finally hear the inner voice that you've ignored for too long. Thoughts settle, emotions calm, the dust of daily life begins to clear. Silence creates the space for clarity to emerge, the kind of clarity that can only come when the heart is no longer wrestling with the chaos around it. It is in these moments of quiet that you begin to see your life from a higher perspective. You understand the choices you made, the paths you took, the mistakes you regret, and the blessings you overlooked. Silence becomes the light that shines into the corners of your soul, revealing things you could never notice when you were rushing or reacting. A softened heart is a heart that can reflect, not just on life, but on Allah. It is a heart that can feel gratitude deeply, seek forgiveness sincerely, and recognize guidance when it comes. In silence, the heart finally becomes humble enough to listen to the truth it once resisted. It becomes tender enough to be moved by reminders, gentle enough to receive wisdom, and open enough to welcome change. Silence doesn't just quiet the world, it awakens the soul to everything it was meant to see. Silence protects you from reacting in anger, regret, and emotional impulsiveness. When emotions rise quickly, they often speak louder than reason. In heated moments, the heart becomes clouded, the mind becomes tense, and the tongue becomes restless. Words spill out that you don't truly mean, and actions unfold that do not reflect who you really are. But silence steps in like a gentle guardian, placing a soft boundary between your emotion and your response. It gives you the space to breathe before you break, to pause before you regret, and to reflect before you speak. In that pause, something shifts. The anger that felt overwhelming begins to lose its intensity. The sadness that pushed you toward impulsive decisions RTS to settle. Silence cools the heat of the moment the way shade cools the harshness of midday sun. It provides the time needed for your heart to return to balance, for your thoughts to organize themselves, and for clarity to reappear. Without silence, emotions dictate your actions. With silence, wisdom takes the lead. There are moments in life where silence saves relationships, protects dignity, and preserves peace. It prevents you from responding to hurt with more hurt. It stops you from adding fuel to a fire that doesn't need to grow. It reminds you that every word you speak shapes your reality, and not every emotion deserves a voice. Silence lets the emotion pass before you decide what deserves expression and what is better left unspoken. This kind of silence is not weakness. It is strength wrapped in self-control. It is the maturity of recognizing that reactions made in haste often become burdens carried for years. Silence becomes a shield, protecting you from wounds you might cause with your own hands. It guides you toward responses rooted in patience rather than pain, and choices guided by calm rather than chaos. In silence, we learn to respond instead of react. Reaction is immediate, raw, and often driven by emotion rather than understanding. It comes from the part of us that is tired, overwhelmed, or wounded. But response comes from a deeper place, a place touched by reflection, calmness, and clarity. Silence becomes the bridge between these two states. It allows the heart to settle long enough for wisdom to rise above impulse. When you pause before reacting, you give yourself the gift of perspective. You begin to see the situation not only from your own pain, but from angles you couldn't recognize in the heat of the moment. The mind clears, the emotions soften, and the heart becomes capable of choosing a path that reflects who you truly are, not who you are in a moment of frustration or fear. Silence acts like a veil that gently filters your thoughts, letting only the ones worthy of expression pass through. In that stillness, you become more aware of your intentions. You ask yourself why you feel triggered, why certain words or behaviors affected you so deeply, and whether your response will bring peace or unnecessary harm. Silence gives you the space to align your actions with your values, your faith, and your sense of dignity. It allows you to respond from a place of purpose rather than panic. When you practice this kind of silence consistently, it transforms the way you navigate life. Arguments become softer. Conflicts become manageable. Emotional storms lose their power to control you. You begin to carry a calmer energy, one that influences your relationships, your decisions, and your inner peace. Silence becomes your teacher, showing you that strength is not in speaking quickly, but in speaking with intention. It guides you toward responses that heal rather than hurt, build rather than break, and reflect wisdom rather than impulse. Silence is a form of sabr, patience with yourself, with others, and with the timing Allah has written for your life in a world that constantly pushes you to speak, explain, justify, and react. Silence becomes an act of restraint. It is the quiet acceptance that not everything needs to be addressed immediately, not every emotion needs a voice the moment it arises, and not every situation demands your intervention. Silence teaches you to hold space for what you feel without being controlled by it. It becomes a soft form of patience, one that calms the heart instead of exhausting it. When you practice silence as sabr, you give yourself permission to slow down. You stop forcing answers before their time and stop rushing healing that needs gentleness. Silence becomes a reminder that growth often happens quietly, beneath the surface, long before you can see results. It teaches you that Allah is working even when nothing seems to be changing on the outside. Silence becomes an inward surrender, whispering to your soul that waiting is not a punishment. It is a preparation. With people, silence becomes a shield of patience. It keeps you from responding to harshness with harshness or reacting to ignorance with anger. It allows you to step back and recognize that not every comment deserves your energy and not every conflict is worth your peace. Silence becomes the boundary that protects your heart from unnecessary hurt and reminds you that true strength is not in arguing, but in choosing peace. And when it comes to Allah's timing, silence helps you trust. It teaches you to observe the unfolding of your life without constantly questioning why something hasn't happened yet. In that quietness, sabr becomes more than a concept. It becomes a lived experience. You learn to wait without resentment, to hope without desperation, and to move through life with a calm that comes from knowing Allah never delays except with wisdom. In silence, the whispers of Iman rise above the whispers of fear. When the world is loud, when your thoughts are racing, when anxiety presses against your chest, fear becomes the dominant voice. It speaks quickly, urgently, insistently. It tells you stories of what could go wrong, what you might lose, how the future might break you. But the moment you enter silence, something shifts. Fear loses its grip, and the gentle voice of faith begins to surface, the voice that was always there, but hidden beneath the noise of worry. Silence allows you to hear your heart's true language. It reminds you of the truths that fear tries to bury, that Allah is with you, that His plan is always unfolding for your good, that nothing happens outside is mercy. When everything around you becomes quiet, Iman begins to feel louder, more present, more real. You start to remember the promises Allah made, the reassurance held in the Quran, the calmness that comes from surrendering to His will. Silence becomes a spiritual amplifier, lifting the voice of faith so you can finally hear it clearly. Fear thrives in chaos, but Iman grows in stillness. When you step away from the noise, you give your soul a chance to breathe, to reconnect, to realign itself with divine certainty. You begin to see that fear exaggerates while faith illuminates. Fear tells you everything is falling apart, while Iman reminds you everything is falling into place. In silence, these truths become easier to hold, easier to trust, and easier to live by. The heart finds peace when it listens deeply. Silence becomes the moment where you choose faith over fear, trust over panic, and surrender over control. It teaches you that Iman does not need loudness to be powerful. It only needs space, stillness, and a willing heart ready to hear Allah's subtle, comforting guidance. In silence, tawakkul begins to take the place of panic. When life becomes overwhelming, the mind instinctively tries to control every outcome, predict every possibility, and secure every path. This constant striving for control creates exhaustion, fear, and unease. But when silence enters the heart, something changes. The urge to cling tightly loosens. The fear that pushes you to overthink softens. The mind becomes quiet enough to remember that you were never meant to carry everything alone. Silence becomes the doorway to trust, a trust that is gentle, grounding, and deeply liberating. In that stillness, you begin to acknowledge the limits of your own power. You realize that you cannot rush what Allah has delayed, you cannot hold on to what He has removed, and you cannot force what He has not written. Silence helps you accept this truth, not with bitterness, but with calm surrender. The heart that was once filled with panic now leans into the reassurance that Allah is taking care of what you fear, arranging what you worry about, and guarding the path you have not yet walked. Tawakkul is not passive. It is an active release, and silence teaches you how to perform that release. It slows your thoughts long enough for you to recognize when your soul is gripping too tightly. It helps you see where your trust has weakened and where fear has taken over. In that recognition, you find the strength to let go, not because you've given up, but because you finally handed your affairs to the one who never fails. Silence allows you to feel Allah's closeness without needing words. It is in those unspoken moments that your heart remembers its true protector, its true provider, its true guardian. panic fades, not because the situation has changed, but because your trust has deepened. And in that deepened trust, the heart finds a peace that no noise could ever give. Silence helps you recognize your triggers, your emotional patterns, and your spiritual needs. In the busyness of life, it is easy to become reactive, unaware of the recurring emotions and situations that shape your responses. Anger flares before you understand why. Sadness lingers without explanation, and fear creeps in unnoticed. But when you step into silence, you create a sacred space to observe yourself honestly. You begin to notice the moments when your patience wears thin, when your heart feels heavy, and when your soul longs for comfort. Silence acts as a mirror, reflecting the inner workings of your mind and heart, revealing patterns that were previously hidden beneath noise and distraction. In this stillness, you can trace the root of your emotions. You start to see what situations, word, or behaviors trigger intense reactions, and you begin to understand the deeper needs behind those reactions. Perhaps it is a longing for acceptance, a need for reassurance, or a desire for closeness to Allah. Silence allows you to confront these truths without judgment. It gives you the courage to acknowledge your vulnerabilities, to accept your imperfections, and to seek healing from the one who understands your soul completely. Through this practice, silence becomes a teacher. It trains you to respond to life with mindfulness rather than impulsivity, to approach relationships with awareness instead of knee-jerk reactions, and to care for your soul's needs with intentionality. You begin to see that every emotional flare-up is not just a moment of weakness, but a message, a signal from your heart pointing you toward what needs attention, care, or surrender. In silence, the soul learns to speak without words, guiding you toward balance, growth, and a deeper connection with Allah. Silence is not weakness, it is a divine strength wrapped in softness. In a world that often equates speaking loudly with power, remaining quiet can feel counterintuitive. Yet, there is a profound courage in choosing stillness, in holding your tongue when the heart urges you to speak, in stepping back when the world demands action. Silence requires patience, restraint, and self-awareness, qualities that the loudest voices cannot always embody. It is a strength that does not seek attention, but quietly holds the heart together, even when everything around it feels chaotic. In silence, the soul gains clarity. By stepping away from the rush of words and opinions, you create space to listen to the whispers of guidance, intuition, and divine inspiration. You begin to see situations with greater understanding, without the distortions of ego or haste. This quiet strength allows you to act from wisdom rather than emotion, from reflection rather than impulse. It teaches that power is not measured by the noise you make, but by the calm you carry and the integrity you uphold when no one is watching. Silence also protects the heart. It shields you from conflict, unnecessary arguments, and the exhaustion that comes from constantly defending or proving yourself. It allows you to conserve energy for what truly matters: your faith, your intentions, and your connection with Allah. In choosing silence, you are practicing a form of self-mastery, a subtle yet profound strength that demonstrates control over your inner world even when the outer world feels uncontrollable. Moreover, silence communicates humility. It acknowledges that you do not have all the answers and that some matters are best left in Allah's hands. It is an unspoken declaration of trust, patience, and wisdom. Through silence, the heart learns that true strength is not loud or forceful. It is patient, reflective, and anchored in faith. Silence creates space for healing, forgiveness, and emotional detox. In the clamor of daily life, the heart rarely finds a moment to pause, to reflect, or to release the weight it carries. Pain, resentment, and disappointment accumulate silently, like unseen debris in the corners of the soul. Silence becomes the gentle space where this hidden burden can surface safely. It allows the heart to acknowledge its wounds without judgment, to feel sorrow without being overwhelmed, and to confront memories that have been tucked away in fear or shame. In this quiet, the soul begins to breathe again, and the process of inner cleansing begins naturally. Healing starts in stillness. When you are silent, you are able to sit with your pain long enough to understand it, to trace its origins, and to offer it to Allah. Silence teaches that you do not need to rush forgiveness or force closure, but that healing grows in patience, reflection, and surrender. By allowing yourself to be quiet, you give your heart the chance to release anger, bitterness, and grief, replacing them with understanding, compassion, and peace. Emotional detox does not mean forgetting or ignoring. It means observing without being consumed, letting go without losing yourself, and trusting that Allah is mending what only He can. Forgiveness becomes easier in silence. When the tongue is quiet and the mind is still, the heart can soften. You begin to see the humanity in others, the limitations in yourself, and the mercy that Allah extends to all. Silence provides the space to pray sincerely for those who have hurt you, to seek guidance in releasing grudges, and to allow divine wisdom to shape your perspective. In this sacred stillness, emotional wounds are not ignored but transformed. The heart learns to let go, the soul learns to rise, and the spirit finds a gentle peace that only silence can nurture. Silence aligns you with Qadr, reminding you that Allah sees what you cannot say. There is a deep wisdom in realizing that not every struggle, fear, or longing needs to be voiced aloud. In the quiet moments, when words fall away, the heart begins to acknowledge the reality that everything unfolds according to Allah's divine decree. Silence becomes a teacher, showing you that life is not always about what you can control, influence, or explain, but about what Allah has already planned for you. It is in these moments of stillness that trust in His Qadr deepens, and the soul learns to rest in His knowledge and wisdom. When you stop rushing to justify, argue, or demand outcomes, you create space to witness the unfolding of Allah's plan. The heart becomes attuned to the subtle signs, the gentle nudges, and the quiet reassurance that everything, every trial, every blessing, every dela is part of a divine orchestration. Silence teaches patience because it reminds you that Allah's timing is perfect, even when it feels slow or uncertain. The unseen becomes visible in the heart, and the soul grows confident that what is meant for you will never pass you by, and what is not meant for you will never reach you. In silence, your actions and prayers gain depth. You no longer speak out of frustration or desperation. Instead, you surrender in quiet devotion, trusting that Allah knows what you cannot express. Silence becomes a sacred dialogue with your Creator, one where words are unnecessary because He sees the intentions, the fears, the hopes, and the pains that remain unspoken. It is a reminder that while the world may not witness your struggles, Allah always does, and His decree encompasses all that you cannot articulate. This alignment with Qadr transforms silence into a source of peace, strength, and unwavering trust. Silence is an act of surrender, handing over what your tongue cannot fix to the one who can. There are moments in life when no words, no explanations, and no arguments can heal the pain or resolve the confusion that resides within. In these moments, the heart longs for release, yet the mind insists on control. Silence becomes the sacred bridge between human limitation and divine intervention. By choosing quiet, you are consciously letting go of what you cannot change and entrusting it entirely to Allah, acknowledging that He alone has the power to mend, guide, and restore. Surrender through silence is not passive. It is an active, conscious decision. It requires humility to admit that your efforts, though sincere, may not suffice. It requires courage to stop trying to manipulate outcomes and to trust in the wisdom of the one who knows the unseen. In that stillness, you discover the freedom of letting go, the relief of releasing the burden of constant worry, the comfort of no longer carrying what was never yours to carry alone, the heart learns that true strength lies not in endless striving, but in the willingness to submit fully to Allah's plan. In silence, the soul also finds clarity. The space that is created allows you to reflect on your intentions, your desires, and your deepest fears. It becomes easier to distinguish between what requires action and what requires trust. You realize that not everything needs to be voiced, not every struggle needs an immediate solution, and not every burden needs your constant attention. Some matters are meant to be left in Allah's hands, where they will be tended with infinite wisdom, mercy, and precision. Through this surrender, silence transforms from a mere absence of speech into a profound act of worship, healing, and spiritual empowerment. The journey toward Allah always begins in an inner stillness where the heart whispers, I am returning. Before actions, before prayers, before words are formed, there is a quiet stirring within the soul, a gentle recognition that something is calling you back to your origin. Silence creates the sacred space for this awareness to surface. It is in these moments of stillness that the heart begins to remember its purpose, its longing, and its need for connection with the divine. The distractions of life fade, and the soul feels a gentle tug toward reflection, repentance, and renewal. In this inner quiet, you become aware of the distance between your present state and the peace that comes from closeness to Allah. You recognize the patterns that pull you away, the thoughts, actions, and attachments that cloud your heart. Silence allows you to observe without judgment, to confront without fear, and to acknowledge without shame. It is a safe space where the soul can speak honestly to Allah, where intentions are clarified, and where the heart's true desires are laid bare. This stillness becomes the beginning of transformation, a turning point where the act of returning is conceived in humility and sincerity. Through silence, the soul learns patience and trust in the journey. The return to Allah is rarely instantaneous. It is a gradual unfolding, a series of small steps guided by reflection, repentance, and devotion. In the quiet, you learn to embrace the process, to accept your weaknesses, and to rely on Allah's mercy for guidance and correction. The inner whisper of return becomes a constant companion, urging the heart to seek knowledge, to pray with sincerity, to act with integrity, and to surrender with love. Silence, then, is not emptiness, but the fertile ground from which spiritual growth emerges, the beginning of a journey that transforms the heart and realigns the soul with its creator. In the power of silence lies a profound truth. The world may demand your words, your reactions, your constant movement, but your soul thrives in stillness. Silence is not emptiness. It is a sanctuary, a teacher, and a pathway to Allah. It softens the heart, nurtures patience, strengthens faith, and allows the whispers of your soul to rise above the chaos. In every pause, every quiet moment, there is an opportunity to surrender, to heal, and to realign with divine wisdom. Embrace silence not as absence, but as presence, a presence that connects you to your deepest self and to the one who understands the unspoken. Let your heart find its refuge in quietness, for it is there, in that sacred stillness, that true strength, clarity, and peace are born.